Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be talking about Shang-Chi, whatever the pronunciation of it is. I've heard every pronunciation under the sun, and how the box office is looking because we finally have the Thursday estimate numbers and also the projected numbers for Friday and the days to come. As I had mentioned in my previous video, these numbers are going to be rolling out every single day, and it'll give us a better idea of how well this film is going to do in the Labor Day weekend market, in the overall MCU market, and also whether that's going to make any difference whatsoever because of the massive budget that this film has, and if it's going to be able to make its money back when even films like Black Widow, which had a better opening on a Thursday, was not able to make its money back. But before going any further, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see, the Friday update from Box Office Pro says Disney reports this morning that Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings earned $8.8 million from Thursday night previews beginning at 7 p.m. across America, the second highest preview result of the pandemic era, behind only Black Widow's 13.2. And it's that number right there that I think is most important, because everyone's saying, look, it's making so much money, it's breaking records, it didn't break Black Widow's record, but hey, 8.8 million on a Thursday during a pandemic is fantastic. Yes, but look how much percentage-wise it is below what Black Widow made. And the reason why that's important is because, as I've mentioned previously, Black Widow, which is hovering around $370 million worldwide, is a film that did not make enough to break even, did not make enough to be able to make its money back. Now, that is an important statistic because Shang-Chi cost roughly the same amount. There's still a lot of question marks as far as how much that film cost, as far as the reporting of the box office, or rather the box office, but the actual production budget for the film itself. But if the film is making less than Black Widow, and if we again still need to see what the Friday numbers are going to be, the Friday to Saturday drop-off, the Saturday to Sunday drop-off, and for me, as I've always stated from the very beginning, the most important drop, the week 1 to week 2 drop-off, is going to be, that is only going to be then at that point where we'll be able to say with any certainty, 1, how much money this film is going to make, and 2, whether or not it's going to be enough for it to actually make profitability. So for anyone trying to spin this as a huge victory for Disney, a victory for Shang-Chi, obviously I think that that is way too early to say so. I would also say it's a little too early to say that this film is a massive flop either. Now, some people might be saying, aren't you kind of playing both sides of this issue because of how you've called out people in the past? It's like, not exactly, right? I again, never claimed myself to be an expert, right? I don't claim myself to be an expert by any means. I'm just a regular dude. I'm a full-time worker, I'm a full-time teacher, and I just happen to like talking about movies and talking about box office especially. And I like just to be able to take a layman's approach to these numbers, because when you look at the numbers are things that really can't be spun and can't be lied about. And that's why my position on Shang-Chi from the beginning is that this is going to be a financial flop. That this is going to be a film, unless it has crazy numbers, which are unlikely at this point, then this film is going to end up losing money. That's not something that you will hear from a lot of other of these box office prognosticators. And also, I've always had a lot of madutes about the way that they do these projections, because obviously they can get somewhat close in their ranges, but in the end, until you have actual raw numbers, especially your week 1 and week 2 numbers worldwide, you really can't know how successful or not successful a film is going to be. That all being said, again, 8.8 million on a Thursday for a pandemic across North America. Again, for a film like this, which is a relatively unknown property with unknown people, I would say that that is, again, a pretty strong number. I think a lot stronger than what some people might have expected, at least people who are a little bit more skeptical about this movie. The real question is it going to be able to hold that kind of strength throughout the weekend, and even more importantly, hold that off from week 1 to week 2? Because if this movie comes out to be a $60 million opening domestically, but it has a typical 50+% drop-off from week 1 to week 2, we're going to start to see, right, that any type of gains that it made in its opening weekend, a front-loaded opening weekend, is kind of ultimately going to be lost. Where this film is unique, especially in comparison to films like Black Widow, is that Black Widow was able to claim certain numbers from the Disney Plus Premier Access, right? Oh, we claim to have made this much money on Premier Access. And again, you know that I have madutes about exactly how they are able to, show those numbers and the financial side of things. I think that there's ways in which these companies can very easily spin a lot of the numbers of behind the scenes stuff. But in the end, I think that we can at least look and understand that they did make some money, obviously, through the Disney Premier Access of Black Widow. But even when you take into account the amount of money that they would have made, Black Widow even itself is barely at the point of it even breaking even. In fact, still very much in the red when you look at everything when all things are said and done. So this is a movie that is not going to be able to rely on those numbers. It's not going to be able to rely on saying, oh, well, we got this and we got that. Not to mention, this is something that's been noted by a lot of people who have both liked the film and not liked the film. This film very clearly was meant and was really made for and geared towards a Chinese audience. They were really expecting this film to get a massive release in the China marketplace and therefore really boost this film to the next level. They were expecting this film to be the biggest financial success of the year because of success in the China market. The issue, of course, is that up to this point, as of recording this video, there is no China release set. Now, I've mentioned previously that because they were able to, Disney was able to work out a deal with China to get Free Guy released over there, it seemed to indicate that there was at least some conversations and talk going on about us potentially seeing the film eventually at some point release in China. But the longer you get away from the release date, the more ability for these movies to be put out online and piracy to be able to impact how much money it could potentially make in that area. So going over to the Deadline article here, which again is always filled with a lot of fun little goodies. Not nearly as fun as Scotty Boy Mendelssohn's goodies, but it says here, Shang-Chi is smashing Labor Day opening weekend records with 60+ million midday box office update. And again, this is something where it's very easy to grab with headlines and really just to spin the narrative, because even though one can argue, yeah, well, historically, this is going to be one of the biggest numbers that we've seen on a Labor Day weekend. The other thing that people fail to remember is that many studios choose to move past and not release their films on Labor Day because it is notoriously lower than what you can get on any other weekend. It's kind of a fool's gold mentality. And so just because they decided, hey, it's pandemic times, we're not making much money anyway, let's just release this film over a 3-day weekend and hope for the best, because at least then maybe we'll have an inflated front-end number that we can kind of try and spin, doesn't necessarily mean that the record-smashing weekend is a good thing, right? Because as I've mentioned, what happens in week 2 and what happens in the week 3, right? The legs that happen on the film are what's going to be most important, and especially, too, how well this film or how not well this film does overseas internationally as well. So by tomorrow morning, or rather, sorry, by tomorrow afternoon, once we actually get the weekend estimates for not just the domestic numbers, but also for the international numbers, that'll give us a pretty good idea. We'll then be able to compare it to other films like Black Widow and other massive $150 million plus budget films, and how well those films did in their end result, and also how much money they lost as well. Because as I said, and even people like Scotty Boy Mendelsohn was able to say, this might be a record-breaking weekend for Labor Day. It also might be one of the lowest openings on record for any Marvel film. So you can see how they're trying to spin this. They're trying to say, look at how positive, look at how awesome this film is doing based on Labor Day standards, and then trying to kind of shy away from and distract away from how well or how not well it's doing based on Marvel MCU standards. And I think that that distinction is incredibly important, because that is going to, I think, be the legacy of this film, is where does this financially fall in the realm of all 20 plus, films that have been released by the MCU, and also as far as financial profitability, how much money is this film going to lose in comparison to others? Because up to this point, the only MCU film to lose money was The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. Now we can add films like Black Widow to that list. Shang-Chi is likely going to also be added to that list, and theoretically might be able to add even more to it, because, as I said, it's not going to have the Disney Premier Access number to rely on. Even the index that follows how comfortable people are going to the theaters will indicate that only about 2/3 or so of moviegoers are somewhat comfortable going back to a theater, with only about 1/3 of the entire moviegoing population being incredibly comfortable. So you're dealing with about 33% or so of moviegoing audiences that are not, or are somewhat not, comfortable going back to a theater. This is a film that's only available in theaters, so that's a big chunk of people that might otherwise have gone to a typical MCU film who are end up not going to go to this, and not going to be able also to buy it on Disney Premier Access because they have the ability of watching it in the safety of their own home. These are, again, all things that really do need to be considered when looking at these numbers. Never let just the initial numbers or specific records, again, they love to throw out these random records that really, in the grand scheme of things, don't mean anything. You know, they'll say, this is the best opening weekend for a rated R film on a Tuesday in November during a leap year. And they'll act as if that is something that's supposed to be impressive, or that is something that is going to have any merit on the profitability of a movie. And in the end, it's no. How much money is it making in total? How much money did it actually cost to make? And where is that discrepancy going to lie? All right, anyway, as it says here from Deadline, Friday midday update. It was always going to be a record-setting Labor Day weekend, but exactly how high will Shang-Chi fly? At this early point in time, we can tell you that the Disney Marvel Destin Daniel Cretton directed movie, again, mouthful there, Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings is looking to do $25 million today on Friday, including last night's $8.8 million in previews. That would be the third highest opening day during the COVID era, after Black Widow's $39.5 million and Fast 9's $29.9 million. And again, I think those comparisons are pretty important. Notice it's during the COVID era. That is, again, the Friday night totals. Also look at how far behind that is of Black Widow percentage-wise. You look at the total number for Black Widow, and then you take into account that you're not going to have Disney Plus numbers to make up for it, and the fact that you have audiences that are not going to be going to the theater who may have paid for Black Widow because they're not comfortable going to a theater, who are not going to have that option this time around, and you start to see, hopefully, why any thought of this film being financially successful is really non-tenable at this point in time. Now, as I've mentioned, and this is something that's always true, these numbers are always pretty unpredictable in the end. And the reason why is because it's hard to be able to predict whether someone actually leaves their house to go to a movie theater and how many of them are willing to do so and what the actual word of mouth campaign is. We already know that sites like Rotten Tomatoes are bought and paid for by studios to try and help build up the hype of different movies. We already know that groups like CinemaScore are a bunch of hacks who like to put out grades without actually giving you any of the data of how they got to that grade or where they actually were getting the grades from, right? What was the demographic of the people that they were asking these questions for? What cities in the theaters were they asking these questions for? And that's kind of important information to understand the kind of person that they are asking who would be willing to give it such a high grade. And it's not really an indication of exactly that being the number of people. Even Gary over at Nerdrotic said he went to go see the movie at a primetime slot, and it was a film, and there were 75 people there, but it was in a theater that sat over 500 people. So, again, you're looking here at a story of depends on where you are, depends on what the theater you have is, and it depends on how many people are actually going to show up to the actual theater. And again, by the end of the weekend, we'll have a pretty good idea of where this stands in relationship to other films and can start to make some ideas, some relative predictions, but again, I've always been consistent on this, that week 2 drop-off is the most important, and that's why I don't make any projections on a film until we get to that week 2 drop-off as far as official projections and official losses or gains. As I said, Shang-Chi's 3-day total looks to be around $60 million with the potential to do in the mid to high $60 million range over 4 days. That's poised to be 126% higher than the previous record day, Labor Day weekend record opener of 2017's Halloween. Now, to my knowledge, this is the only MCU film to be released over Labor Day, so I think that is an important distinction to make. That yes, this might be a Labor Day weekend record, but MCU and Disney have avoided this weekend because of the fact that it doesn't make as much money as other weekends throughout the year. So to say, hey, yeah, we decided to put a MCU film out over Labor Day weekend, and it happens to be doing the best of any Labor Day weekend, again, it's kind of a bit of a misnomer there. I think that it's important for us to provide that full context because of that case. I think that is very important for us to look to that. Let's see what else they have to say. It says exhibitors have a lot to be thankful for. Here is Disney, as Shang-Chi is on a 45-day theatrical window. A lot of people might say it's worth waiting 45 days to watch this movie. Early post-track audiences exit shows 5 stars for the first Asian American Marvel superhero movie with a 99% fresh Rotten Tomatoes score. And again, this means nothing on Rotten Tomatoes because they have again, they've screwed up their entire system here. I would say the post-track audience rating is usually a little bit better of a rating score. So again, to see that there there. But once again, normally we get a little bit more information as far as the breakdown of these alternate tracking things, and it looks like we're not really getting that here. So hopefully we'll get more information as that comes out to get a better idea of what the actual word of mouth campaign might actually be. There is, of course, still this huge push about how, oh, it's the Asians that are going to show up for this film, which I just, again, don't see how anyone who is especially pushing identity politics doesn't see how that is offensive when you're like, oh yeah, this film's going to do well because of Asians. It's like, oh, so are you saying that Asians are just expected to show up to this movie because there's Asian leads? I don't know. That seems kind of reductive to me. It goes on to say, Exhibition Industry Analytics Corporation Intelligence reports that the early audience occupancy for Shang-Chi leans 69% male, 31% female, non-family is 78%, while family groups is 14%, teen groups 8%. So teens not really showing up for this movie. And obviously for them, their demographic that they're looking for are adult men in a certain like 18 to 35 demographic range. And it then says any studio that trailered on Shang-Chi last night per on intelligence reached over 600,000 impressions, all yada, yada, yada. So again, you're looking at all of these different numbers as they come in. Remember also, and I mentioned this in my last video, that it's very easy for studios to be able to really prop up their opening weekends to try and make it look more successful than it actually is. Because normally you have opening weekend promotions and deals and pushes. It could be simple as, if you go see this movie, you'll get an IMAX poster. If you go see this movie, you know, you'll get this special piece of memorabilia. Could also be, hey, we have different groups that are giving out free tickets across the country. All of these things are ways in which you can have the numbers look a lot better than what they actually are. Now, again, that only typically happens in your opening weekend. No studio sustains that throughout the entirety of the run. That's why, again, I bring this back up, that anyone who still holds on to, oh, Captain Marvel only got to $1 billion because of Disney buying tickets, is just, again, not based in reality. However, I will say opening weekend, right, first 2 weeks, that's when you typically see that kind of behavior, but it's always within a very certain confined amount of money and amount of space. It's only about enough for them to be able to push some type of narrative, right? So maybe it's just that this, created an extra $5 or $10 million to make it be the record-setting number. Again, because these studios have a better idea of what is actually going on. But with all these things happening and with all these numbers coming in, it's important for us just to remember that this is something that is not necessarily going to be a massive financial success and is actually more likely than not. And again, my prediction that I will hold on to is that Shang-Chi will end up losing money. And the reason why is because of the fact that this film cost as much as it did. And let's see if we actually finally do have any official word yet on the box office numbers, or rather the actual budget for this film. Sometimes it will pop up, sometimes it will not pop up, and usually, again, I try and stay away from Wikipedia when I can, but again, usually they're pretty good at reporting on budgets as soon as they are available, and as of right now, no budget has actually been reported, but the speculation is that it costs north of $150 million, and it makes sense because a 132-minute film with a massive amount of CGI like this film has is going to cost a lot of money. The only way that you can say the film doesn't cost as much is because they really don't have that many stars in the movie as far as big names that might require more money. But things are, again, looking good for Labor Day weekend records and for the initial spin that's going to happen from those record-breaking weekends from Labor Day. But in the end is going to result in a film that I hear a lot of people saying is fun, but ultimately forgettable, is decent, but ultimately not that great. And the numbers, I think, will end up reflecting that, because even if you can, again, spin Labor Day weekend specifically, those week 2 numbers are going to be a huge deal. And if this film has a very small drop, hey, maybe you're onto something. If it doesn't, if it has a typical MCU drop of anywhere between 50 and 70%, we'll start to realize, oh, okay, it had a great opening weekend for Labor Day, but let's remember that this is also Labor Day weekend and not any given typical MCU opening weekend. Anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Please let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. And again, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And again, thank you to all the people who have recently subscribed to the channel. It's been awesome to see some growth, and I love to see that there are people interested in box office numbers, and it's great to be reporting on box office numbers again. It is one of the passions that I have, and if you want to do your own tracking for yourself, you can, of course, follow my own box office tracking on my website, ombreviews.com, where I have the tracking for films ever since I started doing tracking a long time ago. At this point, back in 2019 is when I have the actual charting itself. I've been doing it for a lot longer, but when I actually started charting this stuff was back during 2019 with Joker. And you can actually see over on there just how correct I've been in my predictions, how correct is my 2-week modeling. And I think that you'll realize that most of the time it ends up being pretty accurate. My 70 to 50% range is usually how it falls. Again, there's a few examples of films that are overperforming in certain ways. So for instance, this one right here, The Gentleman, overperformed, had a lot better legs. So that means it made 37% of its entire run in the first 2 weeks, whereas you'll see many others can fall even above and do a lot worse, like this 87% for a film like The Rhythm Section. And you'll notice too, especially when it comes to lower budget films, typically not nearly going to be as accurate as the bigger budget films, because I came up with this by basing it off of a lot of the Star Wars films and a lot of the other bigger budget films, and that 50 to 7% range tends to be correct. I'll have an average down here, though, to see what the actual average is, just to show you how accurate this is or not. But again, take a look for it yourself and see the kind of losses and the kind of gains that can be expected. And of course, I'll have this updated tomorrow with Shang-Chi, and also be able to make predictions on Candyman and whether or not it will be financially successful or not. Anyway, you guys are great. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my September Locals, Patreon, and Subscribe Star members. First with my Locals members, Cats App, D Sharp, It's a Modern Major General Story, Laura Bifford the Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. I want to give a shout out to, especially to Laura, who is now a double supporter on Locals and on Patreon. So thank you for that. And to all of my Locals members. A shout out also to my Patreon members, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, Laura the Modern Major General Story once again, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B., the Empress of the Universe. And a shout out also to my Subscribe Star members, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B., Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for supporting the channel. It really does mean a lot. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single video or live stream on the main channel, please check out the links in the description below, specifically that top link, which will bring you to all of the links to my various social media pages and also places of support as well. And remember that if you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also get access to giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I have a live giveaway of Snatch on 4K Steelbook. I've also got ones for Dread, Wrath of Man Blu-ray. I've also got A Quiet Place Part 2 on 4K. I've got Top Gun on 4K, Sicario on 4K, tons of films and more to come, especially as more films are getting released for those giveaways. At the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. Not only do you get to listen to the podcast, you also get to ask questions that we answer as much as we can and as fully as we can in a much more, I guess you could say, uncensored way, but again, a much more free-flowing way for our members over there at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. And if you join the Chosen of Valhalla level, you get access to all of those things, plus in your first month, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, and I send it to you no matter where you are in the world. And also, you get to once a month be featured on the channel in the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we talk about movie, news, and pretty much anything that you want to talk about. So if that all sounds like fun to you, check out those links below. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.